design solutions ahead of when they might actually appear and be feasible in the market. Some of these things are like really strange looking, but it's really interesting to see what designers can do when you remove the typical production constraints that they're facing. There was actually, in the US many years ago, the idea of basically soccer plus mom, equals, well, nowadays it basically equals SUV, but it used to equal Volvo. That was usually kind of the market that they served. At some point the SUV came along and displaced Volvo in that niche, that market niche. So Volvo actually tried a really interesting thing internally. They got a lot of the women engineers together and built an all-woman design team and had them design a car at Volvo just to see what would happen, and see if there was any gender basis, in what they would design versus the mixed teams that they normally did. This is what they came up with. It was called the Volvo YCC, or Your Concept Car. And it was kind of interesting looking at this car, the design decisions that came out of this all-female team. They, in fact, ended up incorporating a lot of interesting technologies. This is a racing technology where basically for very fast fueling of a race car, they have this fold-away cap, this fuel cap. You just push the gas nozzle in there and it folds down and you pull it out. There's no gas cap to lose, basically, which seemed to be a big issue with them. And this is really more efficient in a lot of ways as well. They had huge amounts of storage space, cup holders, big areas for putting purses and all this stuff that you typically wouldn't find in a car. They had very reconfigurable storage space in back. This is an interesting design decision where some of the women on the team had ponytails in the back of their head. They said that the headrest would always push their head forward, so they put a notch in the headrest so it would accommodate ponytails. They also made the seat inserts reconfigurable so they could actually change the color and style of the car without having to go shop for a new car. So it's interesting when you kind of invent new problems like that, the kind of solutions that pop up that actually can be very wide, general solutions. There was another interesting kind of automotive project. It was a joint venture between Sony and Toyota. They decided to see what would happen if they made it a Toyota with an IO, taking technologies from both totally unrelated things and combining them into a car. And they came up with this thing. It's called the Toyota Pod. And it's a very strange little car. It has some interesting concepts in it, though. It has emotional states. Depending on how you drive it, if you're driving it very hard and aggressively, it gets angry. And so as people see you coming, the red kind of warns them, look out for this guy. If you're driving very, sedately, it gets kind of sleepy over there. If you haven't been in the car for a long time, you come to it in a parking lot, it might be sad because it hasn't seen you in a while. And then when you finally start it, might get happy. It actually, the little antenna of that wags like a tail to kind of indicate, that it's happy to see you and stuff. This is taking a lot from kind of IO technology. They were also interviewing a lot of Japanese, like teenagers. They were, what does your car mean to you? What do you do with it? And for a lot of them, the car was a place to hang out. They might just go park at, like Harajuku somewhere and hang out in the car. And so they really designed the interior of the car to be not just, a place where you sit to go somewhere, but a place where you can sit to socialize. The seats can all turn and face each other. So in some sense, it's like a little mobile kind of living room that they can bring around with it. So, again, very interesting design solutions, coming from a very unexpected design problem. Art is another field, fine art, that we've learned a lot from, I think, in interactive design. If we look at the history of art, starting way back 40,000 years ago with these kind of, very primitive cave paintings, they were attempting to be representational. Over time, over the millennia, the representations became more and more accurate. Eventually, as it started moving to 2D painting, the colors of the paints, the forms, the actual perspective that people were adding to these things got more and more accurate. Until around 400 years ago, modern art kind of achieved realism. This is almost what the game industry has been doing with graphics. We've been trying to get more and more realistic games, and we're about here now in the game industry. Art did this about 400 years ago. What was interesting is how art progressed past that. Once they basically hit the bar of realism, they started pushing to more abstract interpretations. So at first, art was really about representing the external world. What do I see coming into my senses? After they achieved that, they started turning inwards. How can I represent my internal state, my emotional state to an outsider, so that I can look at this picture and get some sense of how I'm feeling. So art became very introspective, very interpretive, and this is something that I think we're going to see more in the games industry now that we've hit hyperrealism. And it's kind of interesting that at some point art has become entirely abstract. A lot of them fine art out there. And if you ask 10 people what this is about or how it makes them feel, you get a very wide amount, degree of answers. So there's a lot of imagination that a person's bringing into this. In some sense, the artist, by controlling how representational the image is, can control how much the user, the viewer, is basically participating in the process. In fact, inviting the viewer to come in and add more of their own creative interpretation to the artwork. Magic is another field that's very interesting, we can learn a lot from. You know, magic is really all about getting the person to build a long model in their head of what's going on. So the magician stands up and holds an empty hat, you say, oh, it's an empty hat, and he turns around and pulls a rabbit out of it. So he basically gets you to build a long model, and then he breaks that model at the right time to basically surprise you. AI in games is very much like magic. You know, we are always basically trying to convince the player that there's another intelligence here. And whether it's a sim acting intelligent or an opponent in a strategy game, really AI is a bag of tricks. You know, there might be pathfinding tricks, it might be conversational tricks, or strategic planning. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is get the player to build an internal model that, you know, represents something that they think is intelligent. Whereas from the programmer's point of view, you kind of know it's just a bunch of plumbing under the hood. There's this very famous example called the Turk, and this is the thing that was built over 100 years ago, and it was supposedly a chess-playing computer. They would open this cabinet, and there would be all these elaborate gears and mechanisms down here, you know, spinning and whirling, and there was this kind of dummy up there, this kind of mechanical dummy that would sit there and play chess with somebody, and it would beat people, you know, at chess all the time. This was, you know, about 106 years ago, I think. It turned out that, in fact, it really was a midget hidden back behind the gears that was actually sitting there playing chess with people. But by opening the cabinet and showing this elaborate machinery, people assumed that it was mechanical. And so they very cleverly got the person to build a long model. In fact, this was a, you know, a mechanical computer playing chess with somebody, you know, many, many decades before it was actually feasible. And really, you know, a lot of magic is about controlling the flow of information. This is typically why a magician has a very attractive assistant. And she stands up prominently at just the right time when the magician is doing something over here he doesn't want you to see. So this is something you learn a lot in game design, is basically how do you control the flow of information, what the player sees, doesn't see, and when they see it. Language is another one, another field that we can kind of learn a lot from, because players are always kind of deconstructing what they see, almost in language terms. It's the way our brain works. There's a game language that if you hear players talk about the game experiences they have, it's a very different language. The stories that they make, the designers think in terms of. We actually use different languages. Imagine you're walking around a corner and you come across this. You know, immediately in your head, your mind is going to chop this up and process it in interesting ways. There's a huge amount of bandwidth that comes in through our senses that eventually extracts down to a very, very small amount of what we consider conscious thought. Most of our intelligence is really pre-conscious in the way we kind of filter and interpret the world. So when you initially see this thing, your mind's going to categorize it very rapidly. You know, in terms of what is it, what might it do, you know, what's at stake, you know, so you might be afraid, oh, it's going to bite me, it's a mad dog. And then what might I do, you know, and again, you're going to couch this in terms of language. There might be a deeper analysis that you go through with a little bit of thought, where you actually have a wider set of things, you know, kind of the agency of what this thing could do to you, and what you might do to it. You know, basically, what is this thing's relationship to me? But you're basically going to state this and categorize it in terms of language. Now, if you think about a mouse, it's almost everybody who uses a computer has learned a gestorial language with your hand that you're not even aware of. You almost seamlessly and fluently speak this language without even thinking about it. In the original mice, basically there were two verbs. There was do and point. You would move the mouse around the point and press the button to make it do something. Then we came out with the two-button mouse, and the language got a little bit more elaborate. Now we have basically interrogate on the right button, so another word was added to that language. Then we got the mouse wheel, and so now we could browse. And then we started getting some other buttons, and then eventually, so many you can't even keep track of them all. But when you think about it, your hand speaks this language fluently, for the most part, without you even realizing it. So we are learning elements of language that aren't even going through our brains at all, hardly. And a lot of games are about this. So when I look at a game, I can very quickly determine what are the nouns in this game. And usually they're more saturated, they're kind of more prominent, they pop out. What are the verbs? You know, frequently this is the most prominent verb in games. And even adjectives. You know, there's actually a functional difference between the large tense and small tense. When you're actually presenting all this stuff to a player, they're going to basically deconstruct it, you know, in kind of a language sense. You can actually go into a computer store, look at all the games, and most of those games you can categorize by what's the primary verb of those games. So a lot of games are very verb-like. You know, in fact, you can kind of pick one verb that is the primary verb of the game. You know, a lot of first-person shooters, well, first thing you do is you grab a crowbar and you go bash everything with the crowbar. And if it's a meaningful noun in the game, it will actually break open. If nothing happens, you know it's not meaningful. So you actually use the crowbar to interrogate the game as to what's the meaningful language. A lot of games, the buy mode will basically teach you the language. In The Sims, we had these elaborate catalog entries that reading the entries, you can get a sense of what the interesting or the relevant adjectives were by the ratings. Like this is comfort and room, this has comfort and hygiene. So you kind of learn the adjectives of the game just by looking at what's available. And this is